Welcome to Reform Thinking. So, imagine for a second taking a modern corporate training manual, right? You open it up and you try to read it while sitting in a mud-filled trench.
Oh, man, yeah. With, like, hostile forces completely surrounding you.
Yeah. And artillery shells going off overhead. The book in your hands is full of strategies for, maximizing quarterly profits.
Right, or tips for climbing the middle management ladder.
Or advice on making safe, diversified financial investments. You are sitting there reading about boardroom synergy, but your current reality involves literal survival.
Which is a staggering mismatch of environments. I mean, the rules of engagement for a peaceful office building will get you killed on a battlefield.
Oh, 100%. And that severe mismatch is, well, that is the scenario we are bringing to you today. We have a specific mission for this session.
We are taking a close look at the parable of the pounds.
Right, which is found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 11 through 27. And for a very long time, modern Western readers have treated this specific text like that corporate training manual.
Yes, we tend to read it through the lens of modern capitalism.
We treat the master in the story like a divine chief executive officer, right? And we view the servants like middle managers who are being evaluated strictly on their financial profit margins.
But today we are using the Middle Eastern cultural analysis of Kenneth E. Bailey.
Combined with a really rigorous theological framework.
Yeah, to strip away every single one of those modern corporate assumptions. Because projecting our modern financial systems backward into the first century agrarian world causes immense damage to our reading of the text.
It really does.
When we do that, we miss the actual high-stakes drama taking place. I mean, this narrative is not a manual on how to generate personal wealth.
Right, or how to be an efficient entrepreneur.
No, it is a story about survival, allegiance, and the intense danger of claiming a disputed king in a society that wants him dead.
So let us unpack all of that. Our goal today is to rescue this text from the boardroom. We are taking it out of the sterile office building and putting it back into the dust, the blood, and the political tension of the ancient Near East.
Because this parable is a high-stakes summons to public loyalty in an intensely hostile world.
But, before we even get to the noblemen, the servants, and the money, we have to talk about the physical and emotional setting. We have to establish why Jesus told this specific story at this specific moment.
Right, because the environment entirely dictates the meaning. Context dictates everything here.
So where are we in the narrative?
Well, we are in the immediate aftermath of the Zacchaeus encounter. Jesus has just passed through Jericho.
And Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector.
Which, in that society, meant he was viewed as a traitor. He collaborated with the Roman occupation to extort his own neighbors. He was despised.
Yeah, hated by everyone.
Yet Zacchaeus has just experienced a radical conversion. Jesus looks at this hated man and declares, "Today, salvation has come to this house."
I always try to put myself in the shoes of the crowd when I read that. I mean, that is a massive statement to make in public.
It is huge.
And it happens right in front of these huge crowds of pilgrims. They are all making this steep, brutal physical ascent from Jericho, which sits below sea level, up into the mountains toward Jerusalem.
Right. It is a harsh, hot, exhausting climb, and they are doing this right before the Passover festival.
Why does the timing of Passover matter so much here?
It cannot be overstated. Passover was the annual, highly charged national commemoration of political liberation from Egyptian bondage.
So you have thousands of people walking toward the capital city, actively remembering how God once crushed an empire to set their ancestors free.
Well, spot on. The air is thick with anti-Roman zeal. Nationalist fervor is at an absolute boiling point.
They are expecting a sudden, miraculous restoration of the Davidic throne right then and there.
Yeah, I can only imagine the psychological leap the crowd makes in that moment. They look at Jesus, who has been performing miracles.
They look ahead toward Jerusalem, the seat of the government.
They hear the word salvation spoken over Zacchaeus, and they put 2 and 2 together to make 5.
So they're suffering from a severe case of over-realized triumphalist eschatology.
Which is a big theological phrase, but yes.
Let us break that down for the listener. What does over-realized triumphalist eschatology actually mean on a practical street level?
It means they expected the final resolution of human history to happen immediately.
Like today.
Right. They expected Jesus to march into Jerusalem, unleash raw, unfiltered messianic might, overthrow the Roman occupation violently, and establish a visible geopolitical empire by the end of the week.
Wow. They wanted the crown without the delay.
Yeah, they wanted the victory without the suffering. They assumed the arrival of the king meant the immediate, instantaneous removal of all their enemies.
It makes me think of a farmer.
Yeah.
How so? Well, imagine a guy going out into a dirt field on a Monday morning. He drops a single seed into the ground.
Yeah.
He goes to sleep, and then he wakes up on Tuesday morning absolutely furious that there is not a full, mature, golden harvest waiting for him.
Right. He is completely ignoring the necessary, drawn-out, painful growing season.
Yeah, the disciples in the crowds are looking at Jesus like he is about to produce an instant harvest.
So, let me ask you this. Why is the human heart so addicted to shortcuts? Why do we constantly prefer sudden victory over faithful waiting?
That is a great question. The desire for shortcuts is really rooted in our aversion to vulnerability. Waiting requires immense trust.
And waiting in a hostile environment requires immense courage.
Precisely. The interim period, the time between the promise of a kingdom and the actual physical fulfillment of that kingdom, is always the most dangerous phase.
Right.
The disciples, much like all of us today, prefer an immediate dominant political resolution because it removes the requirement for daily risky faith.
Because if Jesus conquers Rome right in that moment, the disciples do not have to endure the tension of being a persecuted minority in a pagan empire.
Spot on. Jesus recognizes this dangerous impatience. He sees that their timeline is fundamentally flawed. So he uses this parable as a massive pedagogical speed bump. A speed bump to shatter their immediate illusions. He's essentially telling them, the kingdom is real, but your timetable is completely wrong. You need to prepare for a long, painful delay.
And to make them understand just how dangerous this delay is going to be, he taps into a very specific, very bloody historical memory.
Right. The historical backdrop of this parable is chilling. Jesus is not inventing a fantasy scenario here.
No, he is drawing on the literal political history of the region. He is bringing up events that the parents and grandparents of his audience lived through and probably suffered from.
We are talking about the Herodian dynasty, correct?
Yes. Let us rewind a bit to the year 40 BC. Herod the Great, a figure of immense paranoia and ambition, traveled to Rome.
Okay.
He made a highly perilous journey to the imperial center to secure his kingship from the Roman Senate. He faced significant opposition, but he succeeded, and he returned to rule Judea with an iron, murderous fist.
So that was the first instance of this kind of political maneuver.
Yeah, but the more poignant memory happened closer to their own time, in the year 4 BC.
This involves his son, Archelaus.
Correct. Herod the Great dies, and his son Archelaus makes the exact same journey to Rome to petition Caesar Augustus. Archelaus wants the full title of king over Judea.
But the Jewish and Samaritan populace know Archelaus, right? They know his ruthless, vindictive character.
Oh, they do. So they do something incredibly audacious. A delegation of 50 prominent Jewish citizens follows Archelaus to Rome to protest his coronation before Augustus himself.
I always find this detail staggering. They actually show up in Rome, they stand in the imperial court, they look the emperor in the eye, and they say the very words that show up in the parable.
Yes, we do not want this man to reign over us.
It is a quote lifted directly from their own traumatic political history.
It really is. Augustus listens to this delegation. He decides to deny Archelaus the full title of king, giving him the lesser title of ethnarch instead.
But Archelaus still gets the rule over the territory, right?
He does, and when Archelaus returns to Judea, he returns in an absolute fury of vengeance. He systematically slaughters thousands of his opponents in the temple courts.
Wow. It was a brutal massacre that completely scarred the national consciousness.
So when Jesus begins his story by saying, "A nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and then return," the crowd must have frozen.
They remember the blood on the temple steps. They remember the terror of waiting to see if the delegation would succeed in Rome or if the tyrant would return to kill them all.
And this completely upends the modern corporate reading of the text. When the nobleman in the story departs to secure his throne, no one left behind knows for sure if he will succeed.
So operating a business in his name, taking his money, and publicly trading with it in the market is not mere commerce.
No, it is a brazen public declaration of allegiance to a contested, hated ruler.
If you take his money and open a stall in the market under his banner, you're putting a massive target on your own back.
Absolutely. Because if the delegation succeeds in Rome and the nobleman is banished, the citizens will execute you as a collaborator the moment they get the news.
That represents extreme social and physical risk.
It really does. The smart money in that first century political climate would be to take the nobleman's cash, bury it deep under the floorboards, and wait in absolute silence.
You remain politically neutral until a clear victor emerges.
Yeah, Jesus is illustrating a highly volatile political transition, showing that claiming loyalty to the absent king will invite the wrath of the surrounding culture.
Okay, I want to push back on this for a second because I struggle with the analogy Jesus uses here.
Sure, go ahead.
If Christ's kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, if he is bringing peace and reconciling humanity to God, why utilize such a violent, politically charged historical event to make his point? Doesn't that risk encouraging the very political rebellion he is trying to correct in the disciples?
That is a very perceptive question.
Because if they hear a story about Archelaus, aren't they going to think about swords and zealots?
Well, Jesus is not endorsing the violence of Archelaus. He is adopting the framework of that historical terror to illustrate the immense social risk of public faith.
Okay, so stripping away the romanticized view.
Yes, he is stripping away the romanticized view of what follows his departure. He is telling them, my kingdom is not of this world, but the world's reaction to my kingdom will be just as vicious as its reaction to a political rival.
Oh, I see. The danger the followers will face for declaring that Jesus is Lord is going to be just as lethal as opposing a tyrant like Archelaus.
That is right. He is recalibrating their expectations for the interim period. He wants them to know the environment will be hostile.
He is preparing them for the reality of the book of Acts.
Yeah, they're going to face a Roman Empire and a religious establishment that says, we do not want this Jesus to reign over us. They will be expelled from synagogues, stripped of their livelihoods, and executed.
So Jesus is using the Archelaus narrative to say, do not think the time of my absence will be a time of universal acclaim. It will be a time of intense hostility, and your loyalty will be tested by fire. So the environment is firmly established. It is hostile, it is deadly, and the king is absent. Now the camera zooms in. The focus narrows from the grand geopolitical background to the nobleman's specific interactions with his 10 stewards right before he leaves for the far country.
And here is where we get to the sovereign distribution of the resources.
Right. The text tells us the nobleman summons 10 servants, and he gives them 10 minas. Now, I went into this assuming the mina was like a massive multi-million-dollar venture capital fund.
A lot of people do.
But looking at the sources, a mina is just 100 days' wages for an agricultural day laborer. That is enough to start a small market stall, but it is not empire-building money.
Well, it is not.
So why such a relatively modest amount, and why is it identical for everyone?
Well, a mina was a Greek unit of currency. As you noted, it was equivalent to approximately 3 months of wages. It is a substantial sum for a working-class person, but not an astronomical fortune like the talents mentioned in Matthew's Gospel.
Right.
But the most striking detail here is the uniformity of the distribution. He gives exactly 1 mina to each of his 10 stewards.
The amount is identical for everyone. 10 servants, 10 minas, 1 apiece.
The theological weight of this identical distribution is immense. It completely refutes the idea of earning favor through initial human merit or varying personal talents.
So this one identical mina represents what exactly?
It represents the singular, unearned deposit of saving grace, the gospel, and the calling given to all believers.
Wow, so this brings some core theological concepts right to the surface of the text.
It really highlights the absolute priority of grace. Notice the sequence of events. The master does not evaluate their resumes, look at their past business successes, and then fund the most promising entrepreneurs.
He does not demand that they prove their worth before he gives them the capital.
No, the stewards receive the capital first. Accountability follows much later. The initial standing and equipping of the servant is granted freely. It is a sovereign prerogative.
You know, it makes me think of a standard issue uniform given to soldiers of boot camp.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, when a private is handed that uniform, it does not represent their personal physical strength. It does not mean they have already won medals for bravery or demonstrated tactical genius.
Right, it simply represents the authority of the army they now belong to. Every single soldier gets the identical uniform, regardless of their background.
So how does realizing that the capital is entirely a gift, a standard issue uniform of grace, alter the pressure we often feel to perform for God?
It fundamentally shifts the motivation for everything that follows. If you think you have to earn the initial capital, you will live in a state of constant legalistic terror.
Because you will view every action as a desperate attempt to prove you deserve the gift in the first place.
Yes, but if you recognize that the mina is an unearned deposit of sovereign grace, it relieves the crushing pressure of trying to justify your own existence.
You are no longer working for your salvation, you are working from it.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. However, we must be careful not to fall into the opposite error.
Which is what?
Well, while the gift is free and unearned, true faith always produces visible public fruits. The uniform is free, but once you put it on, you are expected to fight the war.
So the grace given by the master is not meant to be a static possession.
Right. It is an active, dynamic force. It is given with a strict command, and that command brings us to the linguistic keys of the passage.
Because the nobleman gives them the mina and then issues a very specific directive. And modern English translations often obscure what he actually says to them.
Yeah, most standard English Bibles will translate the master's command in verse 13 as something like, engage in trade until I return.
Which sounds completely like a corporate deadline. It sounds like maximizing production before the end of the fiscal quarter.
It does. It shifts the theological emphasis to a clock-driven pressure. But the original Greek phrase used here is on ho or eschemai.
Okay, let us break that Greek phrase down for the listener. What are the mechanics of that phrasing?
The phrase on ho translates literally as in a situation in which. It can also function as a causative, meaning because. So a far more accurate translation of the king's charge is, conduct business in a situation in which I'm coming back, or engage in trade because I am returning.
That is a subtle shift, but it changes the entire atmosphere of the command.
It really removes the focus from just beating a clock and places the focus entirely on the reality of his promised return.
So he is telling them, the environment you're about to enter is defined by my absence and the certainty of my return.
Yes, your actions must be governed by the fact that I am coming back to this exact spot as the rightful ruler. It is an eschatologically shaped command.
So it is a mandate to live a certain way in a specific reality. And then there's the verb for the actual trading, right?
Yes, the verb used in verse 15 when the king returns to evaluate them is diapragmatuomai.
Diapragmatuomai.
Right. This is a very rare compound verb. It is a hapax legomenon in the New Testament, meaning this is the only place it appears in the entire biblical text.
I want to pause here, because this is where the cultural disconnect becomes incredibly obvious. How should we understand diapragmatuomai?
Well, Western capitalistic ears hear the word trading and immediately think of profit margins. We assume the king is asking, what is the percentage yield on my investment?
But that is not what it means.
No, the primary historical and classical usage of this specific verb does not measure the profit margin. It measures the extent of business transacted. It measures the sheer volume of activity.
So he is not conducting a financial audit. He is not looking at the bottom line to see who squeezed out the highest return on investment.
No, he is examining the ledgers to verify the extent of the steward's public exposure. Think back to the setting we established. The city hates the nobleman.
Right. The citizens have sent a delegation to Rome to say, we refuse this man's reign.
So if a servant takes the nobleman's money and hides it, the ledger is blank.
Right.
But if a servant's ledger is filled with hundreds of transactions, buying grains, selling tools, negotiating contracts.
Every single one of those transactions was done in the name of the absent king.
Yes. A filled ledger proves that the servant lived openly in the light, declaring loyalty to the absent king every single day, right in the faces of the people who wanted the king dead.
Wow. Every receipt is a public confession of faith.
Let me make sure I'm grasping the practical difference here. Unpack the difference between seeking a high profit margin versus seeking maximum public transactions.
Sure.
Because those two goals might lead a person to act very differently in a marketplace.
Well, if your only goal is a high profit margin, you might engage in highly unethical behavior. You might exploit the poor, or you might make a few very safe, quiet, hidden bets that yield a high return without drawing any attention to yourself.
You could become wealthy without anyone in the town knowing whose money you're using.
Precisely. But if your goal is maximum public transactions, you are forced to interact with the community continuously. You maximize your exposure, you maximize the risk.
You are a constant, visible, undeniable representative of the king in a society that rejects him.
The master values the faithfulness of the exposure, not the self-glorying success of a hidden profit. That reframes everything about how we read this text. The king is measuring their courage, not their business acumen.
It is entirely about courage and loyalty.
And that brings us to the devastating failure of the third steward. The master returns from the far country. He has received the kingdom, and the enemies have failed to stop his enthronement.
The first two stewards come forward, and their ledgers are full, but the third steward approaches, and he has a completely different story.
What happens with him?
The third steward approaches and says, Lord, here is your mina, which I kept laid away in a cloth.
The cloth.
Specifically, the text says he kept it in a sudarian, which is a sweat rag.
Like a piece of cloth you would use to wipe the sweat off your face while doing manual labor.
Yes. To understand the depth of the betrayal here, we have to look at the rabbinic laws regarding entrusted money in that era.
Okay, what did the law say?
If someone gave you money to hold and you wanted to be legally protected from liability in case of theft, the rabbinic law stated you had to bury it deep in the earth.
Really? The earth?
Yes. That was the recognized standard for safe preservation. The earth was considered the ultimate unstealable safe.
So if you dig a hole and bury the coins in the dirt, you are officially off the hook if a thief comes along and manages to find it. You fulfilled your legal obligation.
That was the law. But this steward does not bury the mina in the earth. He wraps it in a sweat rag.
Why does that matter?
Yeah.
What is the practical difference between burying it in the dirt and wrapping it in a rag?
It comes down to accessibility. If you bury it deep in the earth, it is out of sight and hard to retrieve quickly. You have to go out, find the spot, dig up the dirt, and pull it out.
Right.
If you wrap it in a sweat rag and tuck it into your belt or hide it just under your mattress, it is instantly accessible. It is physically rubbing against you, a constant reminder of your anxiety.
This is calculated cowardice. He is hedging his bets against the political outcome.
Remember, the delegation is in Rome trying to strip the nobleman of his power. The steward does not know who is going to win. By keeping the coin accessible in a sweat rag, he maintains absolute political neutrality.
Oh, I see. If the nobleman's enemies win the political struggle and come looking for the nobleman's assets, the steward can instantly pull out the rag and hand the money over to the hostile citizens.
Proving he never did any business in the nobleman's name, he is trying to survive by playing both sides.
You know, it is like wearing a completely neutral gray jacket to a fierce, violent rivalry sports game.
That is a great visual.
Yeah. And inside your bag, you have the jerseys for both teams. You just sit there quietly in the stands, refusing to cheer for anyone. You wait until the final whistle blows.
And once you see the scoreboard and know who won,
You quickly pull out the winning team's jersey, put it on, and run down to the field to celebrate like you were with them all along.
that illustration highlights the absurdity of his position. He wants the benefits of being on the winning side without enduring any of the friction during the contest.
Right.
And to take that sports analogy a step further, imagine the fans of the opposing team actually run the stadium and they're armed. That is the level of threat we are talking about. He is terrified of the crowd.
So the text makes it clear that hiding one's faith to preserve social standing is treason. In a rebellious world, neutrality is a myth.
There is no neutral ground when the king's authority is absolute. The refusal to act is itself an action.
It is a declaration that the servant cares more about his own survival and social respectability among the rebels than he does about the honor of the king who gave him the gift.
That is the core issue.
So for you listening to this right now, where in your life are you keeping the king's resources wrapped in a sweat rag, just in case the culture turns against you? Are there places in your professional life, your social circles, or your academic pursuits where you are maintaining that gray jacket neutrality?
Because this parable is telling us that such neutrality is highly offensive to the king.
And the reason it is offensive is revealed when the steward opens his mouth to defend himself. This brings us to the dark root of his cowardice.
Yeah, the steward does not just hand the money back. He offers a justification for his behavior.
What does he say?
He says, "I was afraid of you because you are a severe man. You take what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow."
So he blames his inaction on his fear of the master's character.
This is where Kenneth E. Bailey's cultural analysis shines a blinding light on the text. We have to understand the cultural nuance of the phrase, "you reap what you did not sow."
Because to modern ears, it sounds like he is just calling him a tough, shrewd businessman.
Yeah.
Like a Wall Street guy who gets a huge return.
Right, but we have to look at two competing cultural frameworks in the ancient Near East. The nomadic Bedouin raid culture and the settled agrarian farming community.
Okay, let us examine the Bedouin raid culture first. How does that phrase function there?
In nomadic Bedouin culture, survival often depended on raiding other tribes. Honor was associated with plunder and predatory acquisition.
Like taking things by force.
Yes. In that context, calling a chieftain a man who reaps without sowing, someone who rides into another territory and takes the harvest that someone else planted, is actually high praise.
Wait, really? It is a compliment.
Yes. It means you are a successful, strong, ruthless warlord who can provide for your tribe by taking from your enemies.
So it is a compliment to a raider.
Yeah.
You are so strong, you take whatever you want.
Well, that is right. But Jesus and his audience are not nomadic raiders. They belong to a settled agrarian farming community. In an agrarian society, honor is bound up in land preservation, hard work, and covenantal integrity.
So if you say that to a farmer,
If you say to a farmer in a settled community, you reap what you did not sow, it is a devastating, vile insult.
oh wow,
It means you are a lawless thief. It means you are an oppressive extortionist who waits until the poor, hardworking farmers have tilled the soil, planted the seed, and brought in the harvest, and then you swoop in and steal the fruit of their labor.
it is accusing the master of being a parasite.
Spot on.
I want to pause and let that sink in. The steward thinks he's offering an excuse, maybe even a twisted compliment based on a flawed worldview, but he is actually insulting the very core of the master's character, right to his face.
He is projecting his own fear and his own twisted framework onto a generous king. The narrative has already proven the king is generous. He gave them the minas freely.
But the steward views him as a tyrant. He looks at grace and sees extortion.
And because his theology of the master is completely warped, his actions are paralyzed.
He judges God as a harsh, legalistic taskmaster, and that inevitably freezes him in spiritual stagnation. I want to ask a question about that dynamic. Is it possible to have perfectly correct doctrines on paper, yet live with a functional theology that views God as a tyrant?
Oh, absolutely.
How does our internal view of God dictate our external courage?
It dictates everything. You can sign a confession of faith that says God is gracious, merciful, and loving. You can pass a written theology exam with flying colors. But your functional theology is revealed by your risk tolerance.
That makes a lot of sense.
If your functional, everyday belief is that God is waiting for you to make a mistake so he can punish you if you believe, he is a severe man who demands a harvest without providing the seed, you will never take a risk for his kingdom.
You will wrap your gifts in a sweat rag and hide in the shadows.
Your external courage is directly proportionate to your internal assurance of his goodness. Bad theology paralyzes.
So the master judges him from his own mouth. He says, I will condemn you with your own words, you wicked servant. You knew that I was a severe man, taking what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. Why, then, did you not put my money in the bank, and at my coming I might have collected it with interest?
The master does not validate the servant's slanderous theology. He does not agree and say, yes, you are accurate, I am a thief.
Yeah.
He uses the servant's own twisted logic against him to expose the hypocrisy. He is pointing out the complete inconsistency of the servant's position.
He is basically saying, if you truly believed I was this ruthless, terrifying monster who demands a return at all costs, your fear should have driven you to at least do the bare minimum and take it to the bankers. You would have done something.
If fear was truly the motivating factor, he would have chosen the safest route to generate a small return. The bankers were available, but he did nothing.
So the inconsistency proves that the real issue was not paralyzing reverence, but a total lack of love and loyalty.
The servant's theology was an after-the-fact excuse for his treasonous desire to remain neutral.
What does all of this mean when the master actually evaluates everyone? Let us look at the final stage of the structural design of the text. The king's return, the evaluation of the stewards, and the dealing with the rebels. I want to look at the faithful stewards first.
Okay, so the king has returned. His authority is unquestioned. The first servant approaches and says, Lord, your mina has made 10 minas more. Notice the grammar of humility in that statement.
He does not say, look at what I achieved, or look at my brilliant trading strategy.
No, he attributes the productive power entirely to the entrusted gift. Your mina has made 10. He recognizes that the grace of the initial gift is what empowered the subsequent fruitfulness.
This is a beautiful picture of dependent obedience.
And the reward for this dependent obedience is staggering. The king says, well done, good servant. Because you've been faithful in a very little, you shall have authority over 10 cities.
10 literal cities.
The reward is entirely disproportionate to the task. Managing 100 days' wages faithfully results in the governance of massive metropolitan centers.
The faithful stewards are not given a passive, self-indulgent retirement. They do not get a hammock on a beach.
Not at all.
Their reward for hard work is a massive escalation of responsibility in the coming physical kingdom.
That is a vital point for understanding the biblical view of the eschaton. The future kingdom is not an ethereal, disembodied state where we float on clouds playing harps. It involves physical reign, governance, and administration over a renewed earth.
So the obedience we practice now, the risks we take now in the marketplace, are actual preparation for the responsibilities we will hold in the age to come.
Faithfulness in the small, hostile arena of this present age qualifies the servant for vast authority in the vindicated kingdom.
But then we look at the unfaithful steward, the one holding the sweat rag. What is his judgment?
The king orders the asset to be stripped from him, take the mina from him, and give it to the one who has the 10 minas.
And the bystanders in the story are shocked by this. They say, Lord, he already has 10.
The king replies with an eternal principle. I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away.
The static preservation of grace results in deprivation. If you try to hoard the gift without using it, you lose the gift entirely.
Spiritual privilege neglected becomes judgment. The light that is rejected darkens the mind. The truth that is suppressed hardens the conscience.
The servant who refused to participate in the public life of the kingdom is stripped of his standing within it.
And then the camera pans away from the household servants and turns toward the hostile city.
The citizens who sent the delegation to Rome. The ones who looked at the emperor and said, we do not want this man to reign over us.
This brings a geopolitical tension introduced at the beginning to a head. The king issues a chilling decree. But as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me.
It is a terrifying sentence of retributive justice.
It represents the unavoidable reality of final judgment for those who actively rebel against the lordship of Christ. But there is a brilliant narrative nuance here, a Middle Eastern rhetorical strategy known as the unfinished symphony.
The decree to execute the enemies is pronounced. The order is given. But the text deliberately stops before the sword falls.
If you read verse 27, it ends with that harsh command. And then verse 28 immediately says, and when he had said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem.
The parable just ends. The curtain drops while the executioners have their swords raised in the air.
We never see the action carried out. We never hear the results. It is an open-ended conclusion.
Why do that?
In ancient Near Eastern storytelling, pausing a decree of judgment right before the execution is an invitation. It is designed to draw the listener into the tension. It forces the audience to live in the space between the sentence and the strike.
Which means this open-endedness is an invitation to the original audience standing on the road to Jericho. And it is an invitation to you, the listener, today.
It represents the exact era we are living in right now.
We are living in the delay. We are living in the space where the judgment is announced, but the enemies are being given space to drop their weapons.
The present age is the day of grace. The delay of the consummation is not proof that the king has abandoned his throne, nor is it proof that he lacks the ability to execute justice.
Right.
The delay is an act of immense, patient mercy. He is giving the hostile citizens time to reconsider their rebellion. He is giving them the opportunity to look at the faithful servants trading in the market, hear the message of the kingdom, and switch allegiances before the symphony concludes.
That reframes how we look at the history of the world right now.
We must hold these two realities together. The king is generous, and the king is holy. He distributes unearned grace, and he demands public loyalty. He delays his wrath to allow for repentance, but the day of reckoning is absolutely certain.
We have taken this text out of the corporate boardroom. We have put it back into the dust of a volatile, dangerous, first-century political transition.
We see that the mina is an unearned gift of grace. We see that the ledger is a record of courageous public exposure, not a profit margin.
We see the cowardice of the sweat rag and the paralyzing danger of viewing God as a tyrant. And we see the king return to reward the faithful with cities while pronouncing judgment on the rebels.
The theological depth of this parable is astonishing when viewed through the correct cultural and doctrinal lenses.
It changes how we view our daily lives. I want to leave you with a final thought for today. A thought entirely distinct from the preceding analysis, yet built firmly upon it. We just discussed that suspended note. The execution decree is spoken, the swords are raised, but the action is paused. The curtain drops right there. Consider that the very breath you are taking right now, listening to this, exists solely inside that dramatic pause. The corporate manual you have been trying to read is useless because you are not in a boardroom. You are on a battlefield, operating in enemy territory, holding the king's unearned capital in your hands. This delay in history is not the king abandoning his throne. It is a calculated, terrifyingly gracious suspension of the blade.
That is a heavy thought.
It forces a radical question upon you. Are you utilizing this agonizing pause to wear a gray jacket, wrapping your faith in a sweat rag to blend into the hostile crowd? Or are you aggressively using the king's capital out in the open market, risking your reputation, to invite the surrounding rebels to switch sides before the symphony finally concludes? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.